All right, so before I forget, our next character study is going to be on Samson. Those notes are on the back, or on the table in the foyer, so you can pick those up as we should be at least getting close, if not finished, with Aaron and Miriam tonight. So the last thing we covered, we started looking at some of the characteristics that we might consider bad from Aaron. We looked at the example in Exodus chapter 32, how that Aaron, he physically carved this golden calf out of the gold that the children of Israel had taken out of Egypt. They demanded a god, so Aaron gave them one. He said, "This is the Lord." I don't know if Aaron, he didn't call the golden calf the name of an Egyptian god. He said, "This is the Lord." And so I tend to look at that as Aaron was attempting to make this a representation of Jehovah, a graven image. And so this is the representation of God. But we see in Deuteronomy chapter 9, we're going to start in verse 7. But before the children of Israel go into the land of Canaan, into the promised land, Moses has some things that he wants to remind the children of Israel. And there's a couple things that are listed here by Moses that gives us some more detail into the events of Deuteronomy, or Exodus chapter 32. So here in Deuteronomy 9 and in verse 7, "Remember, do not forget how you provoked the Lord your God to wrath in the wilderness. From the day that you departed from the land of Egypt until you came to this place, you have been rebellious against the Lord. Also in Horeb you provoked the Lord to wrath, so that the Lord was angry enough to have destroyed you, When I went up into the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant which the Lord made with you, then I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water. Then the Lord delivered to me 2 tablets of stone, written with the finger of God, and on them were all the words which the Lord had spoken to you on the mountain, from the midst of the fire, in the day of the assembly. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days and 40 nights that the Lord gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. Then the Lord said to me, Arise, go down quickly from here, for your people whom you brought out of Egypt have acted corruptly. They have quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded image. Furthermore, the Lord spoke to me, saying, I have seen this people. Indeed, they are a stiff-necked people. Let me alone, that I may destroy them, and blot out their name from under heaven. And I will make of you a nation mightier and greater than they. So I turned and came down from the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire, and the 2 tablets of the covenant were in my 2 hands. And I looked, and behold, you had sinned against the Lord your God, had made for yourselves a molded calf. You had turned aside quickly from the way which the Lord had commanded you. Then I took the 2 tablets and threw them out of my 2 hands and broke them before your eyes. And I fell down before the Lord, as at the first 40 days and 40 nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water, because of all your sin which you committed in doing wickedly in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. For I was afraid of the anger and hot displeasure with which the Lord was angry with you to destroy you. But the Lord listened to me at that time also. And the Lord was very angry with Aaron and would have destroyed him. So I prayed for Aaron also at the same time. Then I took your sin, the calf which you had made, and burned it with fire and crushed it and ground it very small, until it was fine as dust. And I threw its dust into the brook that descended from the mountain. And so he goes on to describe the times that Israel provoked the Lord to anger, and all basically to say, don't do that anymore. You be faithful to the Lord, you trust in God. But I thought this was interesting in verse 20, how that the Lord was very angry with Aaron and would have destroyed him, but Aaron prayed for him at the same time. And so obviously God spared Aaron. So did God hold Aaron accountable to an extent for what happened? Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we looked at what happened, and certainly, regardless of what Aaron's intentions were, we could give him the benefit of the doubt and say, well, maybe he was just trying to keep everybody stable, keep everybody calm until Moses came back down. Maybe he was just trying to bide time, whatever. But at the end of the day, he was the one that told them to give him the gold. He was the one that put it in the fire. He was the one that carved the calf. He was the one that ultimately set up a feast day and said, this is a feast to the Lord. And so regardless of what Aaron's intentions were, they certainly backfired, for one. And two, let's say for a moment that it was his intention to try to just buy time until Moses returned. Is it ever okay to compromise our faith in an effort to keep people at peace? No. And this would be a great example. If it is in fact true, and again, we're giving Aaron the benefit of the doubt on that one, that he was just trying to keep everybody as calm as he could, he still compromised the trust and faith in Jehovah. And regardless of whatever his intent was, we cannot compromise our faith, even to calm others or to de-escalate a situation. Nolan?
Question, not particularly about Aaron, but from this story, verse 17 here, Moses is saying, recounting, he's carried these stones down from the mountain and makes a point here, I cast them down and broke them in the eyes of the congregation.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it, picked up on before. Would it be a fair, would that be like us having a contract and tearing it up?
I think it's very symbolic.
And now there's going to have to be a second set of the stone. Because back in Exodus, when Moses is up on the mountain, God was very angry in his wrath, said, I'm going to destroy him. He prays, says, don't do it. Go ahead and give me the tablets. And then he comes down the mountain, and that's when Moses throws them down. He's
right.
Angry also.
Yeah, he didn't throw him down at the top of the mountain. He came down. It wasn't until after he saw what Israel was doing. Yeah, I think there's anger on Moses' part, but at the same time, I think it was deliberately public. I think there was, like you said, like the tearing of a contract, that you have, for all intents and purposes, defiled this covenant. Now we've got to do it again, for all intents and purposes. So yeah, I think there was a lot of symbolism in the fact that he actually brings that out to the children of Israel here to emphasize the importance that these were the tablets from God. Okay, God gave them to me. The finger of God wrote them. That's very important. That now we had to do it all over again, because while I was receiving the covenant, you wouldn't listen to what Jehovah told you to do.
And it also is brought out 2 or 3 times throughout this verse we read. We think about times later when they tempt the Lord. Well, they've been in the wilderness, and you're starving, you're thirsty, or whatever it is. Months have passed. But this is so quickly, as he says here, how quickly you turn. We just made this agreement, this covenant, and wrote it down. And before I could get back down the mountain with it, you've already turned on the Lord.
Right, absolutely. And not only that, but one thing that you don't really pick up on, or at least not very well, in the account in Exodus, is the fact that Moses spent a whole other 40 days and 40 nights fasting, not even drinking, which would suggest that there's some miraculous element there taking place, because we can survive not eating for 40 days, but we can't go more than a handful of days without drinking water. And this is something that Moses was on the mountain twice for a total of 80 days altogether without eating or drinking. And of course, fasting, especially in the Old Testament, but even in the New Testament, what did fasting carry with it in connection with these types of events? Well, what did fasting...
Devoting oneself to the Lord.
Yeah, the total dedication, total commitment. It's like everything is now focused on the spiritual, and I'm not going to focus or think about anything physical during this period of time. And of course, it is interesting that 40 days and 40 nights, that comes up several occasions in the Old Testament. The flood and so forth. So there's a lot there that is kind of has parallels to other places as well. Anything else in Deuteronomy chapter 9? All right. So I mentioned this, not necessarily that Nadab and Abihu, their lack of proper conduct was Aaron's fault, but given Aaron's lack of good judgment at times that we've seen, it just kind of bears mentioning that while two of his sons were faithful, two of them were not. In fact, these two became kind of an example, and they're mentioned on several occasions throughout the Old Testament. But we find that Nadab and Abihu, and this is not just in chapter 10, but we find Nadab and Abihu, they're not particularly honest individuals. They kind of take advantage of their position. They take kind of liberty with the things that they're doing. And in this particular event, they offered profane fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. Again, I point out the fact that every time that somebody breaks the commandment of the Lord in the Old Testament, what does it say? They broke the commandment of the Lord. Okay? Here, it's not that they broke the commandment of the Lord, they did that which God had not commanded them. Which is just another example to show that when God tells you, here's how I want this done, here's where I want you to get the fire, here's how I want you to offer this incense before me, God doesn't have to go through all the hundreds of different other ways not to do it. He tells you how he wants it done. End of the story. Nadab and Abihu did that which God had not commanded them. Verse 2, so fire went out from the Lord and devoured them. They died before the Lord. And Moses said to Aaron, this is what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near me, I must be regarded as holy, and before all the people, I must be glorified. So what two things did Nadab and Abihu do, or not do as the case may be, by not obeying the commandment of the Lord? They did not glorify him. They did not regard him as holy. Why? How was it in this specific event did they not regard God as holy nor glorify him? How did they do that?
They've been my children. I said, well, you think you know more than I do. You're going to do it your way, not the way I said.
Okay. You didn't listen. You didn't listen. And of course, why was it particularly important for Nadab and Abihu? Why did God make an example of them? Why was this kind of important?
They were leaders in the people.
Yeah, they were leaders, obviously, in the priesthood, but even more specifically, their brothers, they were brothers, and they were the sons of Aaron. And from the lineage of Aaron, who was to take, well, what main position came from the lineage of Aaron? High priest. Right, the tribe of Levi, all priests, but the high priest especially from the sons of Aaron. That being the case, would it have served in any capacity for one of these brothers to have become high priest? Can you imagine if Nadab or Abihu had ever become high priest? Okay, so this was a very important event, and of course we see later Eleazar and so forth, and those individuals were faithful to the Lord. But we see how that this is the response God gives to Moses to give to Aaron. God didn't speak directly to Aaron. He spoke to Moses to tell Aaron. And then Aaron held his peace. Which suggests what on Aaron's part? He understood. He got it. Okay, this wasn't a one-time occurrence by any means. Okay, Nadab and Abihu, they had done some things that they weren't supposed to. It had been a bad example before this anyway. But this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. This was it. You don't offer profane sacrifices before the Lord. And when they did this, they took liberty with what God commanded them. And Aaron acknowledged that. He held his peace. So we see later here in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 12. So Eleazar and Ithamar are the two sons that are still alive. Moses spoke to Aaron and to Eleazar and Ithamar, his sons who were left, take the grain offering that remains of the offerings made by fire to the Lord, and eat it without leaven beside the altar, for it is most holy. You shall eat it in a holy place, because it is your due, and your sons do, of the sacrifices made by fire to the Lord, for so I have been commanded. The breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the heave offering you shall eat in a clean place, you, your sons, and your daughters with you, for they are your due, and your sons' due, which are given from the sacrifices of peace offerings of the children of Israel. Then in verse 15 it talks about the thigh offering, and then in verse 16 Moses made careful inquiry about the goat of the sin offering, and there it was burned up. And he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron who were left, saying, Why have you not eaten the sin offering in a holy place, since it is most holy, and God has given it to you to bear the guilt of the congregation, to make atonement for them before the Lord? See, its blood was not brought inside the holy place. Indeed, you should have eaten it in a holy place as I commanded. And so Aaron, he kind of speaks on behalf of Eleazar and Ithamar. Look, this day they have offered their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and such things have befallen me. If I had eaten the sin offering today, would it have been accepted in the sight of the Lord? So when Moses heard that, he was content. Aaron kind of comes to the defense of Eleazar and Ithamar, but the fact of the matter was that there were a lot of details in the law that was given, weren't there? And the fact that Moses, he's angry at Eleazar and Ithamar because it wasn't done exactly right. And that just goes to show, even more so, that details are important when it comes to God's word. Now, as far as I can tell, this is really the only time Ithamar and Eleazar, there's anything particularly negative, okay, about something I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this, that because of all the details, maybe they were just kind of trying to keep track of everything. Maybe they just didn't take special care to remember every little detail, and this just kind of reinforces that. But regardless, it goes to show that these details are important. So, again, I'm not necessarily blaming Aaron for Nadab and Abihu and how they turned out or whatnot. But what have we seen in the example with Aaron and the golden calf? What did we see in that example? What did Aaron lack? Huh? What did Aaron lack in the example? What should Aaron have done? Yeah, he should have had a backbone. Stood up and said, no, you will not do this. This is what God's word says. This is what we've been commanded to do. That they hadn't received the law yet. And he should have stood up for the truth of Jehovah. And it just kind of makes you wonder if Aaron, if that was kind of his personality, if that was something that Aaron maybe didn't do very much, was stand firm in something. Because Aaron's sons, you would think that as soon as Aaron saw them being a bad example in times that they were taking advantage of their position, Aaron would have put his foot down, said, you will not act that way as priests of God. But, and to be fair, okay, it's not recorded, doesn't mean he didn't try. Maybe he did. But it just you kind of speculate, you put two and two together and you say maybe Aaron just didn't like confrontation. Maybe he was afraid to kind of really put his foot down. And so, you just kind of add to that, not that necessarily that the sins of Nadab and Abihu were the sins of Aaron too, but it just goes to show the importance of having a strong example of faith and assurance in God's word, and Aaron may not have always been that. Anything through the example of Nadab and Abihu. All right. In Numbers chapter 12, we have another situation, and this one includes Miriam as well. So when we get to this part about Miriam, we're not going to necessarily go back and read it all, but I want to note what happens here in Numbers chapter 12. It says, Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. So they said, Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Verse 3, Now the man Moses was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. Now stop for a second. Moses was very humble, more humble than all men who were on the face of the earth. Now just think about that statement for a moment. Okay, the Holy Spirit inspiring the writing of this, we know it's true. What an amazing thing to have said about Moses, that he was more humble than anyone alive. Okay, that's quite something to have that said about Moses. But the fact that here in this moment, Moses, who is the leader, okay, God has kind of appointed him leader of Israel. Moses has married an Ethiopian woman, and Aaron and Miriam don't like that. And so now they're dissenting against Moses. They're speaking against Moses. Hasn't God spoken to us as well? I mean, really, is Moses the one in charge here? Can't all three of us be in charge? Now, Moses, he's aware that these things are being said, and that's the reason why verse 3 is here. Because Moses is not going to stand up for his own authority here. Okay, God has given me this authority, but Moses isn't going to start speaking back to Aaron and Miriam. He's not going to kind of assert his dominance or anything like that. That's why the Lord intercedes in verse 4. Suddenly the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. So all three of them here are together. Come out, you three, to the tabernacle of meeting. So the three came out. Then the Lord came down in the pillar of cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both went forward. Then he said, Hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings. And he sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? So the anger of the Lord was aroused against them, and he departed. And then when the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. And Aaron turned toward Miriam, and there she was, a leper. So Aaron said to Moses, O my Lord, please do not lay the sin on us, in which we have done foolishly, and in which we have sinned. Please do not let her be as one dead, whose flesh is half consumed when he comes out of his mother's womb. So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, Please heal her, O God, I pray. Then the Lord said to Moses, If her father had but spit in her face, would she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut out of the camp 7 days, and afterward she may be received again. So Miriam was shut out of the camp 7 days, and the people did not journey till Miriam was brought in again. And afterward the people moved from Hazeroth to camped in the wilderness of Paran. So it's kind of an interesting situation where both Aaron and Miriam, I guess you could say this could be the one example of sibling rivalry, perhaps. Whether it had as much to do with the fact that they were related, or they were just jealous of the leadership position Moses was in. Maybe it was a little bit of both. Regardless, Aaron and Miriam were both at fault in this particular situation. Nolan?
Do you have a better angle to help me understand the jump they make from verse 1 to verse 2? I don't like the guy he married. Is the Lord, is he the only one the Lord's speaking to or through? I have a hard time making that jump. We understand they're jealous or whatever behind them. They want some power or glory or whatever. But because of this woman that he married?
I think that's really what it was. I think this was an excuse to kind of speak against Moses. In fact, I want to say back here in chapter 11, it's actually mentioned that he took this wife, and at the time, nobody said anything.
Because they couldn't find anything else?
And because, well, I think it's stuck to him because, first of all, this Ethiopian woman wasn't of the Hebrews. Okay, and so to them, as the tradition has been, you marry of your own people, for one thing. And then you have the fact that perhaps there was already some jealousy there anyway. And so when Moses did this, and we're not given, I mean, there's nothing that suggests that it was sinful on Moses' part to marry an Ethiopian woman. We're not told specifically why he did that. Okay, would it have been better if he'd married among his own people? I don't know. I'm not really one to say. But we know that outside individuals can have a negative influence. We see that time and time again. In fact, we'll see that later on next week with Samson. It's a really bad example. So I can understand Aaron and Miriam having concerns. Okay, but if you have a concern with somebody, especially a member of your family, about a choice that they've made, what would you and I typically do? We'd go talk to them, right? Hey, I just want to make sure you're thinking this through. Okay, are you sure this is what you want to do? Okay, but none of us would necessarily have any ulterior motives. So we would have no problem going to our brother or sister and saying, both literally and spiritually, and saying, I have some concerns here. So I suggest that both Aaron and Miriam had already some jealousy. And the fact that, and this kind of leads us to the fact that Miriam, we know, she's a prophetess. This is why Miriam includes herself when they say, has not God spoken to both of us as well? Because in Exodus chapter 15 and in verse 20, she's referred to as a prophetess, which is why God specifically says, hey, when it comes to prophets and so forth, I make known to them in a vision, I speak to them in a dream. Which would seem to suggest that's how Miriam received whatever information she received from the Lord. But with Moses, I speak to him face to face. Okay, Moses is different. And certainly Moses' humility probably played a large part in that as well, his character, his attitude. But Aaron and Miriam, and it just kind of goes to show that Aaron and Miriam, and again, it's hard to kind of really get a handle on their personalities and their characters just from what we have. But what we do have of Aaron and Miriam, would they have been a better fit to lead Israel than Moses? Would it have been better if they had a three-pronged leadership? What does God say?
They don't seem to have the meekness he does.
Right.
Next verse.
I'm the one who chose Moses. I've chosen him to lead. And then notice what he says, why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant? He's not just your brother. He's my servant. He's the one I've chosen. And that really seems to be the sticking point here, is that Aaron and Miriam, perhaps because of their familiarity with Moses, they may not have respected the authority that God had given to him the way that they should. And while Aaron and Miriam were both public figures, Aaron especially being the high priest, and Miriam being a prophetess, okay, certainly they were public figures, but they did not, first of all, they didn't have the authority given to them by God, but I suggest they also didn't have the leadership ability that Moses had. And that's part of the reason why God chose Moses. Okay, and then you add to that fact the fact that Moses was raised as Pharaoh's grandson. He was taught in all the ways of Egypt. He was extremely well educated, and yet he was the most humble person on the earth. Think about that. Okay, with all his upbringing, with the way he was raised, his education, yet he was the most humble person in the earth. That's just amazing. It's astounding to me. And that's in contrast to whom? Aaron and Miriam. Doug?
See a little pattern here of King David being a younger brother. So several other characters being the younger, and Joseph, this is what I was thinking of.
Yep.
And then here, Moses being younger.
This
pattern here of not always choosing the oldest that naturally
Gideon.
look up to, but
Yeah.
the little brother that always remains the little brother,
Right.
regardless of any simple.
Right. And that's a great point. Yeah, that may have played another part in it too, because we know, as we talked about last week, that Aaron was 3 years older than Moses. Miriam, we don't really know. We're not given an age for her. She's listed last when Aaron, Moses, and Miriam are listed. She's always listed last. That could be because the males were always listed first and then Miriam was listed. But we know Miriam was what? We know she was at least old enough to be able to see the basket and to help Pharaoh's daughter and so forth to kind of find Moses. The fact that she was old enough suggests she's older than 3 years old. Okay, so I suggest that she was probably the oldest of the three. That Miriam was probably the oldest. She was probably maybe 3 or 4 years older at least than Aaron. And then Aaron came along, and then 3 years later it was Moses. All right.
But it almost kind of makes me wonder, was there just this familiarity with family? Like, me and my sisters bragging at each other about stuff, and they just have a stupid life, and it's I mean, it's like, while we're at it.
I'm going to quote you.
While we're at it, why can't I do this? You can see the foolishness there.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes a progression, but, we saw that with Jesus, too. They didn't understand. His brothers and sisters didn't get his role.
Yeah.
So you can see the foolishness, not realizing, oh, we're speaking against God's servant.
And there may have been a little bit of, I don't know what to call it, protection of the family when it came to that Ethiopian woman. Okay, maybe they were offended by the fact that Moses sought out a stranger, a foreigner, to marry, as opposed to someone from within their own people or even within their own tribe. So there may have been some sort of familial protection going on there as well. But there's definitely, without a doubt, some behind the scenes issues between Moses and Aaron and Miriam. And I do want to mention on the notes that when it talks about Miriam being the sister of Aaron and Moses, that would seem to be the oldest. And I put on their youngest instead, and that's not accurate. We know for a fact she's older than Moses, and very likely older than Aaron as well. So she would seem to be the oldest, and then she died first. And we see that in Numbers chapter 20. Yes.
So if you go back to chapter 11, just to kind of maybe, from what I'm looking at, help with the jump.
Yeah.
People were complaining, so Moses was commanded to get elders together, pick these guys out and meet me out here. The Lord put the spirit that was on him, on all of them, they began to prophesy to include 2 that were back in the camp. And so Miriam and Aaron are watching all of this happen. Okay? And because they were prophesying, this is just kind of where I'm thinking, well, why do they get to do all that? Has he not spoken through us too? Come on now. And look at Moses over here. He married lady this time. All right, look at this knucklehead. And, and then the Lord was like, no.
Yeah.
We're going to squish that now. We're not going to start all of that. It's like a parent, hey, leave your sibling alone.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
There's definitely.
I mean, if you follow that progression, it could very well be why weren't we included?
Right. Yeah.
Because here
Could
we
be.
are, we've been along the whole way, and now we're watching all of this happen.
God talks to us too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Yeah, it's not fair. No matter how old you get, you never escape that, do you? It's not fair. And, in a lot of ways, Aaron and Miriam. Wow. Aaron and Miriam, in a lot of ways, that is kind of the thought process. It's not fair that Moses gets all the attention, that he's the leader.
Especially if it's young.
Yeah, especially if he was the youngest. He gets to marry the foreigner and all this stuff. And yeah, so... But I think it is. I think it's very interesting. And of course, as far as Miriam goes, this is really the only time we really see a whole lot of anything really from Miriam. But from Aaron, this is just another example of poor leadership on his part. Okay, he had the opportunity to be a good leader when Aaron was on the mountain receiving the law, or when Moses was on the mountain receiving the law. Aaron had, at least you would think, he had the opportunity, and maybe he did, I'm just saying, to really put his foot down with his sons to kind of get them straightened out before what happened in Leviticus 10 happened. And then here in Numbers chapter 12, Aaron could have stopped this, nipped it in the bud, You know, he could have, Miriam, listen, God has chosen Moses. We shouldn't be jealous. We shouldn't be upset at the things that he does. You know, well, it's God has chosen him. But they both are complaining against him. Anything through Numbers chapter 12?
It's not to be slighted. Both Aaron and Miriam also have been selected
Oh, yeah.
to do great things.
Absolutely.
At other times, an average Joe rises up and says, "Who are you?"
Right. Korah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
They just like the meekness, evidently.
Yeah. The willingness to acknowledge that they have a role that God has selected for them and to be content with that role. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of, I mean, they're not content with what they've been given from the Lord. I mean, Aaron as high priest, you would think that anybody would be content with that. That's a huge honor of a position. In fact, God specifically refers to it as an honor. Miriam being a prophetess, first of all, she's a woman and she has the Spirit of the Lord and she's able to prophesy. That's an honor. Okay, so they weren't content with what God had given them to do. Doug?
We can see a track record here of God always picking the right person for the right job.
That's right.
And here we see one reason of him saying there was no one more humble
Yeah,
than he was than in all the world.
right,
And so we see why he was picked right there.
right.
You know, and I understand his own brothers and sisters didn't understand it, but we see it years later
Yeah.
of why he was picked.
Well, and
We see that in other characters, you know, Joseph, all throughout the Bible. We find out in hindsight, because we know all of the facts
Right.
of why they were picked and why the perfect timing of everything. When Jesus came, the perfect timing, the role of John the Baptist, we see the perfect timing and the perfect people to do, you know, God's plan.
right,
And God mentioned, how come you weren't afraid to talk about Moses? They weren't even thinking
yeah.
type thing. They let their
That's little
pride-
brother. It's
they let
not.
their pride, the
Yeah.
reason they're not, number one, get in the way of doing God's will.
Right, right. And what a stark contrast, though, when we consider that Moses was the most humble person to ever live, or on the face of the earth at the time. Let me be specific. And yet, why was Moses not allowed to enter the land of Canaan? Yeah. What was he supposed to do with the rock? Supposed to talk to it. And what did he do? He struck it. Now, some people make a big deal about where Moses says, you know, we have brought you, and Moses kind of puts himself on the same level. And that could be part of it, but the scriptures specifically say, here's why you're not going to be allowed to enter the land of Canaan, Moses. You did not listen to what I told you. And given the fact that Moses was such a stickler for the details, that's one mistake. And it just goes to show that even the humblest person in the world at that time, was he infallible? No. No, he made a mistake. He struck the rock instead of speaking to it, and God held him accountable for it. All right, we'll stop here. We'll pick up at Numbers 20 and next Wednesday, and the situation with Miriam, we'll look at that very quickly. We won't spend a lot of time because there's really not a whole lot there about Miriam. We'll get to our questions, and we might have time next Wednesday to get to Samson a little bit as well. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget those notes are on the table in the foyer. Thanks, everybody.